really closely. You can even hear a nasty woman somewhere in Chappaqua, New York, steaming a pantsuit. They are sitting on ready. Wait for it. But before we go today, I'd like to wish a very, very happy birthday to
Well, look, my wife has a rule in her family. When somebody's birthday, sing happy birthday. You ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Alan. Happy birthday to you. Well.
Second hour is here. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. Coming up, Otis Anderson will join us. That will be in hour number 3, about an hour and 15 minutes from now. 20 minutes, Marshi Smith, former University of Arizona swimming champion and the co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports. She joins us to discuss the letter that they wrote the NCAA and that she delivered outside the NCAA convention. To direct action, immediate action to establish the rules to keep women's sports female. That's in
Hutton,
20 minutes from now.
First question to Marshi. Marshi. Hard to say Marshi. What is the Independent Council of Women's Sports, and can you and I form that for broadcasters? Can we just decide? Hutton and Chad are forming the Independent Council for podcast hosts.
I think you just did
And then start it?
I think you just did it.
Do you just form a charter? Like, do you write it up? It's like the Magna Carta?
Yeah, we'll have
Can
bylaws.
I write our Constitution?
Our bylaws?
And write out bylaws?
Yeah.
I would love to do that. That's my first question. What is this exactly? And then we'll move forward with the interview.
And then Chad, you have the model to copy it.
Yes. Well, I don't want to give that away to Marshi, our guest first, to say, look, I'm looking to start my own coalition, so I need to know how you did it first, because we're going to form one, and then we'll figure that out. I can't lead with that, Hutton. I got to lead just with asking that question, and then once we figure that out, then I'll start to write the Constitution.
We've been discussing the Cowboys win last night over the Bucs. But biggest storyline today is Brady, but moving forward, it's Dallas and how far they can take this with a roster that's built to win. And last night, with the play of Dak Prescott, they can win it all with the way he played. Career best performance, but Chad, a fantastic start for Dallas where they didn't just win. There was no question that Dallas was moving forward by halftime of this.
The only question was whether or not Brett Maher was going to miss another extra point at any point.
Yeah, he would have if they scored again.
That was incredible. Well, he finally hit the one. He was 1 for 5 on the night. He missed his first 4 and then hit his final extra point. And the third one, the response from Peyton Manning on the Manning cast was hilarious, where he just stood and went nuts and said, why are we kicking? Why are we kicking? Then he asked the question, can you cut someone at halftime of a playoff game? Talking about the kicker. You could feel some of that old animosity towards Mike Vanderjagt popping back up with Peyton Manning as he was watching this kicking display. That is a performance that a lot of times would get you cut because it's just such a mental yips situation with Maher, but luckily they just blew out the Bucs, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, it's item
so
10
if you
on the
come
list
back
of
and
things.
think, hey, I overcompensated on this one, I was missing right, then I hooked one left, and you can explain it away and you don't look mentally defeated, then you probably keep your job. But other circumstances, they lose that game, that's probably good riddance for Brett Maher.
Jordan Schultz joins us from The Score, NFL insider. And Jordan, I know you heard a bit of that. We were discussing, it's not that Dallas won over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's how they won and the play of Dak Prescott, winning on the road for a franchise in the playoffs for the first time in 3 decades. Your big takeaway from the play of Prescott and what it means for this Dallas organization as they go to San Fran?
Well, first of all, there was a lot of pressure on him. We talk a lot about legacy in this game, for better or worse, and this was a legacy-defining moment. And he had not played well, gents, over the last 7 weeks. He had 7 picks. And I think one of the things that was so great, if you're a Cowboys fan, is he took the bull by the horns, and it was very clear. They had those first 2 negative drives, but right after that, it was very clear that they were going to keep attacking, and they weren't going to be gun-shy. And that's all you want, especially in the playoffs, especially on the road. I picked Dallas in this game because I thought Prescott would play well. I thought he would rise to the moment. And then on the other side, from a defensive standpoint, this is why Dan Quinn is so coveted, because when he took over 3 years ago, the Cowboys had just come off the worst season in franchise history in terms of points allowed. Now they're the first team ever in NFL history to lead the league in takeaways 2 straight years. So if I'm a Cowboys fan, I really can't ask for much more.
So, Jordan, let's look at the flip side of this quarterback matchup last night. And Tom Brady struggling, large part because that offensive line he's playing behind, a lot of other issues. But just your thoughts as you watch that performance from Brady. A lot of people quick to bury him and say that he needs to retire at this point. What say you about the future of Tom Brady as a quarterback in this league?
Well, far be it from me to say Tom Brady should hang him up. I mean, the guy.
Oh, no, come on, Jordan. Call for his head right now. You're the man right here. Tell us right now that he should retire. I'm kidding. You give us your honest assessment.
I just think, listen, I mean, going into the game, I thought there's no way that Tampa can win this game and throw the ball 50 times. They threw almost 60. They never established the run, and that sounds boring, but that's how this team is built to win. They have Fournette, they have Rachaad White. Those are 2 really good backs, and they do different things. And then they have these great receivers. But to me, the whole philosophy for Byron Leftwich and the Bucs was flawed. And part of that was because, your offensive line was patchwork. You talk about Ali Marpet and finally Ryan Jensen playing his first game last night. But the bottom line is, if you have an offensive line that is not very good and is still coming together even at this stage in the season, why are you throwing the ball 58 times? I know that part of that was game script, but you go back to those first 2 drives where they didn't get a first down, and it was very clear that they were going to throw the ball or try to throw the ball all over the yard. And the way to beat Dallas this season was to run on them. That's how teams had success. So I didn't like the game plan at all. As far as Tom Brady, this is not insider reporting. Just me knowing him or knowing his mentality. I don't know how he goes out like this. Arguably his worst playoff game ever. I mean, I don't know how he says I'm done. Maybe he's done with Tampa. I don't foresee him going back to New England, but there's plenty of teams that you could think, that would be a good fit.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm with you. I don't think he's done, and I don't think he's going out like this. So let's just perfect world this thing a little bit. Let's say, Jordan, that he is going to play next year. What's the most intriguing option for him? If he had his pick of a team right now that may be looking for a quarterback, what would intrigue you the most?
The 2 teams that come to mind would be the Raiders and the Jets. And the Jets, because the opportunity to be in New York, and I know it's AFC East and whatever, New England, but the Jets have a very good roster, and they've done a really good job of drafting young offensive talent. When you think about Michael Carter and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, you could go down the line. That would be really intriguing for me. On the other side with the Raiders, obviously reuniting with Josh McDaniels, the opportunity to play with a top-tier, all-pro caliber guy in Devontae Adams. Darren Waller's there still. To me, this was a really disappointing year for the Raiders, not just because they didn't win a lot of games, but because you had Derek Carr, who I had hoped was ready to finally showcase why he at least wanted to be a top 10 quarterback. And they have the pieces there, and they just never got off the ground. And I would put a lot of the blame on Josh, but the opportunity to go to the Raiders would be really interesting if I'm Tom Brady, because it's a historical franchise and you get to go back to the AFC. They have weapons there, and there is a pre-existing relationship that's really positive between him and Josh McDaniels.
Jordan Schultz, our guest from The Score, NFL insider there, and you can follow him at Schultz_report. Jordan, so Sean Payton's talking with organizations. We know he met with Houston. He's meeting with Denver. Friday, he's headed to New York to chat with the Panthers. Of the three options, what do you feel like is the best fit? And do you buy that Sean Payton is truly interested in Houston, or is he using that as leverage for one of these other teams?
The Houston thing is interesting because potentially you can have full control. Like, I don't believe that when Nick Caserio says, if the coach doesn't want me there, I'm going to step aside. But in theory, that's appetizing. Or even if Caserio were to stay, and Sean would have the opportunity to essentially run the franchise day to day, in addition to being the head coach. The Broncos, to me, just 30,000 feet makes the most sense, because he's already said, here's what I do with Russell Wilson, and here's how I would attack this offense. And whether or not you like Nathaniel Hackett, and I was not a big fan, he was supposed to be an offensive guru, and he just never found a way to get Russell Wilson comfortable and to maximize all those dudes they have there. And I'm not sure they're going to keep everyone there in terms of the offense, but Sean Payton going on Cowherd's show and saying, I'm going to take 20 or 30 of Wilson's best plays, especially the naked boots, all those deep balls, and I'm going to attack those. That's pretty cool. And I can tell you this, I know Russell Wilson likes Sean Payton. I know he likes the idea of having a quarterback guru come in. And I know that Sean Payton had a lot of success with another undersized quarterback in Drew Brees. Now, they have different skill sets, but they also do some of the same things. So 30,000 feet, to me, Denver is the best opportunity for him.
Are you as surprised as I am that it will tie Payton in with Brady? We heard both names for the Dolphins a year ago. We're not hearing either guy for the Dolphins now. How surprised are you, given the Tua injury history and the concussion issues, and the fact that Payton's actually available, and we know the Dolphins were interested last year?
The Dolphins, listen, they went out and they made a big splash with Mike McDaniel, a guy who hadn't had any head coaching experience at this level, who thinks a little differently, has the Yale analytics stuff, but also can relate to players. And I thought it was a home run hire at the time, and I still think it was a home run hire. They had some ebbs and flows this year, and part of that can be attributed to Tua not being on the field and having all these concussions. But I still think they found their man long-term in Mike McDaniel, and I think they believe, Chris Greer, the GM, that Mike McDaniel is the future there. He's very well liked in terms of the players, and that's not a prerequisite for success, as we've seen with Brandon Staley and the Chargers. Guys like him, they didn't win, but it does help, and I think Mike McDaniel ultimately is going to be the guy there long-term.
Jordan, what are the Chargers exactly? Are they some cash-poor NFL team? Are they a team that really loves Brandon Staley and the direction of things right now? What is the state of ownership and the state of that organization moving forward after what was an epic collapse in Jacksonville?
I mean, I can't think of a more disappointing team in terms of top-notch talent and what you're getting or not getting with 9-10 wins. It's not enough. And to blow a 27-point lead, the third largest in NFL playoff history, to do so where Austin Eckler, who is an all-pro caliber player, barely gets the ball in the second half. You have one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league. It was just so backwards to me. And, when you go back to week 18 where they played Mike Williams, he fractures his back. There was no reason for him to play in that game. We all understand that. They had already clinched the 5th seed. That's just malpractice to me. And, what my understanding as I reported yesterday was Brandon Staley was safe. They wanted to make significant changes, especially offensively, because Staley really is the defense. So they go out and fire Joe Lombardi. And I don't know if that's going to make a difference, but it does save Staley for the time being. The ownership group has money. The Spanos family is just not willing to spend it, which is why Brandon Staley ultimately still has a job. He's owed about $4 million next season. So the whole organization is just, they're not in cohesion, right? If you think about some of the great organizations or great teams, the ideal situation is head coach and GM in lockstep, but also there's an open line of communication to the owner. That's just not the case with the Chargers. Everything's all over the place. And frankly, Tom Telesco, the GM, has had 3 head coaches, and his job now is probably safe as well because he doesn't move on from Staley. But just as a whole, it's a long-winded answer. I can't think of a more frustrating organization because unlike Houston, for example, or Indianapolis, they have the top-tier talent.
Have you heard a popular name or a leader in the interview process for the general manager position that remains open in Tennessee?
Well, the guy that I love is Rand Carthen from San Francisco, who's head of their personnel and is a phenomenal, not only a phenomenal scout because he kind of got his start in scouting, but is a relationship builder. He's the one that has helped foster DeMeco Ryans. They're extremely close. He identified him as this guy would be a great DC for us. And, DeMeco's arguably the hottest head coaching name right now. So I know the Titans really like Rand. I know he interviewed there. That would be the number one choice for me for a whole host of reasons. But number one, just bringing stability and scouting from the GM position. And listen, I don't know where you guys stand on J-Rob. He's not there anymore. He had his critics. He did draft well in terms of he did hit on some big time picks. You ultimately need to hit on more picks, and that's what I think Rand will bring to the table.
Jordan, let's play a game of what should happen and what will happen with the Titans' offensive coordinator search with Mike Vrabel. What should he do in terms of direction? Should this be something new outside the family, his way of thinking offensively? But ultimately, what will happen with Mike Vrabel and the decision he makes with this position?
I like Shane Steichen from Philadelphia. I think he has what he's done in Philadelphia, specifically with the quarterback and Jalen Hurts, but also like finding what my offense can do, finding what my guys can do best and putting them in those positions. It's not just that Jalen Hurts had an MVP caliber year. A.J. Brown had his best year yet. Devontae Smith had a great year. Miles Sanders, the running back. You talk to anyone in that building, and they'll tell you that a big part of the success is Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, with respect to Sirianni and Gannon. So that would be the guy I would like. Now, I don't see that happening. Did they have any more interviews today or tomorrow for OC?
No, they wrapped up an interview just a few minutes ago with Malik Boyd from Buffalo for the general manager position.
Was it Ben Johnson? What was his? Was he already interviewing?
I don't believe so. Have they not landed? No, you're right. No, I saw his name, but that's it.
Yeah. So to me, like part of this comes back to, Mike. So when you don't have a GM and your head coach, has a lot of power in that building, he's going to be the one identifying oftentimes, okay, this is the OC I think I could work with really well. And ultimately we see a lot of these hires traditionally go back to who's my relationship with, do I have a relationship with this person? Am I comfortable bringing them in? Are they going to acquiesce to me? Are we going to have that common language? And that's what I would imagine would happen. But if you're asking me who's the best fit based on what I've seen this year, it's probably Shane.
And they've got Matt Nagy. They've asked for permission with him and with Bieniemy. And my thought is, if they talk to one, the other one's probably taking if it's Bieniemy, then Nagy stays and takes Bieniemy's spot, right?
Yeah. Bieniemy, I tell you what, Bieniemy has people around the league swear by Eric. The guys that love Eric believe that he's a great mind. Nagy's similar. When he was ran out of Chicago, he had a lot of critics, including myself, but he has reestablished himself in a very short period of time in Kansas City, where suddenly, 2 years ago, people would say, he's not very good at all.
Yeah.
But now people, Matt Nagy, you went to Kansas City. He has the Andy Reid relationship. He's good. So that's interesting to me how quickly guys can turn it. It's like, I'm running out of Chicago. I'm not a hot commodity. Let me restart the cycle. Eric has been there a long time, and you have to wonder if he doesn't get a head coaching job in this cycle, if he's ever going to get one.
We know Cliff Kingsbury's heating things up in Thailand right now. How hot is his name really in NFL circles for an offensive coordinator job once he gets back from Thailand?
I talked to Cliff yesterday for about 20 minutes and, tried to gather some of that information, as well as ask around the league. Hey, what do you think of this guy? What do you think of Cliff? He is definitely – there are offensive coordinator positions that and teams that would like to interview Cliff at the very least. Have him for an interview and see what he brings to the table. He is a very good offensive coach. I think he will learn from the NFL, from what happened in Arizona, some of the mistakes he felt he made, and also the understanding that with respect to Arizona, that was not a functional organization. We talk about owner and GM in lockstep. Well, Steve Keim and Michael Bidwell, I don't know. I can't think of a more dysfunctional 1-2 punch. And there's a reason why they haven't won in a very long time. And, like I would love to tell you that it's all this guy's fault or that guy's fault. It's a collective, just rudderless organization where things have been going a certain way for a long time, a lack of communication, a lack of trust inside that building. That's a lot to do with time. And there's a reason why they haven't had success. So back to the original question with Cliff, there is interest. And I've talked to teams that would like to bring him in, even if it's not as an OC, as some type of offensive assistant to work with their quarterbacks. And, I still think Cliff is deliberating whether or not he wants to coach next season and in what capacity, which is why he's in Thailand right now.
What a great predicament. NFL or Thailand. That doesn't suck. Jordan Schultz.
It doesn't suck, especially when you have $30 million buyout.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Jordan Schultz, he's about to turn from the camera to his right back to the laptop where he will get back to work for the Score.
He'll get back to that chat with Cliff Kingsbury.
That's
over
right.
in Thailand. I'm not sure what time it is in Bangkok right now, but he'll get back to that.
It's way ahead. Yeah, it's way ahead. So, hey, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Man.
Anytime.
Same here. Thank you for coming on. There's Jordan Schultz there from the Score. Always enjoy the chats there on all things NFL. And then, we'll get to some NBA discussion, I'm sure, at some point with him, too.
Absolutely.
Coming up, Marshi Smith will join us. University of Arizona swimming champion, Pac-10 champion as well, and she's championing the message that women's sports need to stay female. She wrote a letter on behalf of the Independent Council of Women's Sports, read this at the NCAA convention last week. We'll chat with her about what the letter said and how she went about co-founding this organization with this message. That's next on OutKick 360.
Another edition of the Trey Wallace podcast. Happy to be joined by my buddy from the Sporting News, Bill Bender. It feels like it's been about a day since I have seen Bill, which is the case since we were out there in rainy California. Bill, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, we didn't get tanned. We did not get a tan in sunny LA. We got rained on all week, didn't we?
That was depressing. Like, I go out there and I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be sunny. It's going to be California. It's going to be nice. No, it turns out it's raining. We're getting drenched during the post-game ceremonies on the field. I don't know. Whoever came up with the idea for that stadium did not think about the rain that would come in sideways.
No, it was a interesting weekend for sure. I'm glad you and I got to connect a little bit and go to media day, and then the game. I don't know what to talk about. You start. I've been using the analogy as like you brought Cinderella to the final and you ended up watching Carrie.
Yeah, is it? I mean, in looking back on it and how everything plays out, I think if Michigan beats TCU, we get a better game, in the final. But turns out that TCU had their number, and you go into this matchup with Georgia, and they're just such a dominant football team from the offensive line, the defensive line. The wide receivers, you name it, and you look at TCU and they had their flaws. And I don't even think Kondre Miller being a running back for TCU would have done anything for the Horned Frogs. I just think they're Jalen Carter and what Georgia's defensive line was able to do. I think it just showed throughout the season that they just wrapped up what they had done for the 13 games prior.
Yeah, right off the bat, there was a false start. And after the game, Sonny Dykes said, we'd only had 3 false starts the whole season. So right off the bat, there's nerves. You heard him talk about how they overran things, may have, missed assignments, breakdowns, and you can't have that many. And it showed, they had multiple, and you can't have that against the team that's a heavyweight like Georgia. That's been there, done that. Their execution in the first quarter, especially on offense, was unbelievable, especially with Bennett. And honestly, I thought this game was probably, and this is horrible to say, I thought it was probably over at 17-7.
I don't disagree. It got so out of hand, you started wondering, okay, what's going to be the title to your story? It just didn't feel like it was going to be close, no matter what TCU did. I give credit to how the game was set up and played, and the atmosphere and whatnot. TCU fans traveled well. Georgia fans traveled well. It made for a fun environment. I think when you look at the game, though, Georgia is just a dominating force. And I want your opinion on this. We use the word dynasty a lot. I think in college basketball, I think in baseball, I think in football, we use it a lot, NFL. Is Georgia at that mark yet, or would they need to win another one in the next 2 years to maybe set up the whole dynasty conversation? Are we here with the back-to-back titles?
I think we're here because, so they'll be our lifetime, I think, the 4th team to have a chance to go for a three-peat. And I go look at those 3 teams, and I was talking about this earlier today with somebody. Nebraska won back-to-back with Osborne, and then that 3rd year, we all know where we were when Arizona State beat them.
Coming up, Iowa and Northwestern being rescheduled due to COVID. Yes, this is 2023.
Didn't know it was still happening.
I know. OutKick 360
Shocking
rolls
tweet when
on.
I saw that.
Marshi Smith joins us, former University of Arizona swimming champion, Pac-10 champ as well, and now she's the co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports. Marshi, great to have you on. Hope you're well.
Thank you so much for having me. My husband thinks I've peaked now that I've made it on OutKick.
Nice. What led you to create and develop your organization?
Well, I'm a very accidental activist. I was a former NCAA champion swimmer in the backstroke. And so witnessing what the events that unfolded last season with Leah Thomas and what I felt was completely a reversal on my own experience back in 2005 when I was on the University of Arizona team. I quickly started reaching out to teammates, and one of my teammates, Carly Baldwin, asked if I would help to write a collaborative letter on behalf of the University of Arizona alumni swimmers. So we sent that to the NCAA, Mark Emmert, and the Board of Governors, as well as our own university. I was barraged with media requests suddenly to speak out about this at that time, and yet we were basically left on read by our athletic department and the NCAA, we still 9 months later have not had even a receipt of response from the NCAA. And so therefore I was trying to come up with ways to communicate our message from the female athletes. I ended up going on the athletic director's website. There was a convention coming to my city, Las Vegas, where 2,000 athletic directors and staff were going to be landing at the airport for a 3-day convention. I got a exhibit booth inside their meeting. I was envisioning standing there alone, handing out flyers by myself to tell ADs to stand up for their women athletes. And thankfully, I was connected through Riley Gaines, the Kentucky swimmer, to Kim Jones, who's the mother of an Ivy League swimmer. She quickly jumped on the bandwagon. We organized tons of women athletes, organizations that wanted to help. We put together our own 3-day conference that was going on at the same time down the street. That was just 54 days later, to let the NCAA know that we have arrived, we're doing something, we're organized, and they can't continue to discriminate against their women athletes. Fast forward to last week, the NCAA met at their convention. We had the blueprint. We got a booth inside the meeting to talk to them directly. And this time we put together a rally of about 24 athletes to speak out on behalf of females again, and read a legal demand letter now that we're threatening to bring a lawsuit if they continue to discriminate against their women athletes.
And Marshi, it's amazing. You said you finished your swimming career in 2005 at Arizona. You're thinking back to 2005 and the state of women's sports, and then going back a generation before that to Title IX, it was always the quote-unquote progressive side that helped women's sports, that pushed Title IX across the finish line, that helped women's sports everywhere. And now this juxtaposition of the quote-unquote progressive side is possibly hurting women's sports. That if you're on that side, it's allowing something that's not going to help girls and women compete fairly against each other. How do you come to grips with that when you look at this story and think about the history of women's sports when you participated to where it may be heading now?
Well, I'm ashamed to admit, to be honest, in 2005, I did not recognize what the women before me had to do to get Title IX in law in the first place. I have been re-educated now recently, now that it is under threat by not only the Biden administration, but all of these sports governing body leaders that are just taking a back seat to activists out of fear. And, we have a 50-year law. There are universities across the country that have thrown themselves multiple 50-year anniversary parties celebrating Title IX all throughout last year, ironically, using photos of us, the women who have built the success and the stories that they can then pat themselves on the back for now, 50 years later, while actively dismantling the opportunities of girls and women to continue to succeed, win, break records, be nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year. I mean, these are all things that we have just seen are now off the table for some women. And, there are athletes now that we're just not willing to let this go.
Marshi Smith, our guest, the co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports. What's interesting to me, Marshi, is by and large, the overwhelming majority of people will agree with our stance, your stance on this. Why do you think the NCAA isn't responding to you?
We're told at the highest levels, not necessarily within the NCAA, but in sports governing bodies we're meeting with across all sports, that There are legal concerns that they feel that the threat from the opposition activists is a bigger threat than of women. We actually had a board member tell us that he didn't believe girls would sue because women wouldn't do that. And hearing things like that firsthand is absolutely infuriating. And we are here to say that's not the case. And we are ready and willing to defend, sex discrimination in our sports and not give up opportunities for our own daughters, like my own 6-year-old who's just starting swim lessons now.
I got to say, Marshi, when we bring up this topic, unlike a lot of other things in our country right now, there's not a lot of division on it. Even people that you would think are on the far left side of this, they just kind of say, well, it doesn't happen enough to be a big issue. They don't argue for it to take place. What's it like in your shoes in terms of what you're hearing? Not what the NCAA's hearing or fear of a lawsuit from another advocacy group, but what you hear personally from the other side of this. Because personally, we don't hear a lot of people coming back and saying, you guys are crazy to say that it's only right for women to play against women and compete against women. We don't get a lot of the other side of that. What do you hear?
I hear the same thing. I mean, the majority of people understand this because it is a common sense reality, truth that exists, that men and women are different and we perform in athletics differently. People understand that. I think the opposition side is kind of banking on and hoping for silence and for fear of speaking out. Once we start talking about this openly with friends, family, go to our university presidents, our ADs, coaches, legislators, and start talking about this freely. This is not a 50-50 split on this. People recognize some people are choosing to prioritize inclusion over fairness and safety for women. And there is a choice to be made because we cannot have an equal balance. So the loud people on the inclusion side that are choosing to exclude women from sports and podiums and awards and record books are hoping on our silence and fear that we'll be canceled or that there's this big monster majority people that are going to come down on you. That is not the case at all. We need to just speak out about this and have some courage and talk to each other about this.
Marshi Smith, our guest, former NCAA champion. Had Leah Thomas competed against you, would you be a champion?
Well, we swam different strokes. No, no. For example, Matt Grievers won the 100 backstroke when I won the 100 backstroke. He won on the men's side, I on the women. He was 7 seconds faster than me if we were compared head to head. However, we were seen as equal champions. He would have beat me by half a pool length. So the way that we can lift up women in athletics is by giving us our own category because we are built differently. We are built of a different design and therefore warrant a different category, just like age, just like weight, just like ability, disability status. We make categories in order to offer opportunities to everyone. Otherwise, we would see 18 to 29-year-old men win every competition there is. So we need to start including all of our women and girls.
And I know, Marshi, in the letter that you read, it's, you're asking the NCAA to take direct and immediate action in establishing rules that keep female sports female.
Yes.
Direct and immediate action means what on a timetable? What do the legal experts tell you? What's the immediate future with this? How quickly are you getting the ball rolling on a lawsuit?
Well, we certainly have attorneys in place and athletes in waiting. We do not want to have to do this. The NCAA, in terms of timeline, if they say, oh, we will review this at a later date next year, we can't do this, that's absolutely untrue. Tomorrow, they can decide to defend the rights of their women athletes. And so we are giving them the opportunity to do so. We are asking them to do the right thing because this is the right thing.
How quickly do you go to the incoming president of the NCAA now that we've got a bit of a lame duck situation with Mark Emmert on the way out to try to make sure that these rules are instituted relatively quickly?
We already have.
And what was the feedback?
We are hoping to sit down with him in the near future. We are open and willing to talk to whomever, any day, anyone in a leadership position. Please reach out to us. We are reaching out to them. We are actively pursuing discussions at the highest levels.
Marshi Smith has been our guest, the co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports. Marshi, thank you for the time. We're on board with what you're trying to accomplish here, and given the fear of lawsuits with NIL and everything else, let's also say this: they're afraid of Title IX lawsuits. I don't know why they're not responding to you in regards to this.
Maybe they will now.
Yeah, well, we hope so. Thank you, Marshi. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right, there's Marshi Smith. And tell your husband thank you as well for being a fan of OutKick. Maybe Marshi is now too.
Maybe. Hopefully.
Or you're tanning, you're self-tanner.
Yeah, she's probably just coming on thinking, why is this guy so pale? This guy needs to get in a tanning bed sometime soon. It's a crazy topic because I just don't encounter a lot of dispute on it. I don't, maybe you're different, Hutton, in terms of, but I mean, I could tweet about this all day and no one's going to contend it. I don't know. Yeah. It's amazing when we convince ourselves that there's just such this small minority of people that you have to fear when making a common sense decision and a common sense call on something. That's what's wild to me. And she brought up some interesting points about the NCAA essentially being more concerned about a lawsuit on one side as opposed to the lawsuit that could be coming on the other side.
You know what else we don't understand? COVID testing right now in college athletics, where a game has been postponed due to COVID. Yes, in this basketball season in 2023, Iowa, and details with their game on Northwestern and the outbreak, quote unquote, that they're pointing to next on OutKick 360.
And how long after 9/11 does your unit, the 160th SOAR, which is the most elite helicopter pilots in the world, how long does it take for you guys to figure out, okay, a plan's being set in motion, we're going to Afghanistan? Was it within days? Was it within weeks?
It was within hours.
Within hours.
So we drive back that night, the battalion commander and I, and the next morning I'm sent down in a 15-passenger van with a bunch of other planners to Tampa, Florida. And we're to plan America's response, as far as the rotary wing side of it. And by October 3rd, I was in the country of Uzbekistan preparing to do personnel recovery for the bombing campaign that was about to kick off.
And this is depicted in the movie 12 Strong. Correct me if I'm wrong, where you guys are going to fly in from Uzbekistan. This is what's known as the horse soldiers. This is going to kind of be the first wave. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. So initially we're there for, I want to say about 2 weeks of bombing. And then there is no further plan that we know of. And then all of a sudden, 5th Special Forces Group rolls in. Their commander takes over the task force. We were in Task Force Dagger out of K2 Air Base, Karshi-Kanabad, and he wants a briefing on our capabilities. And so we sat down and we started talking to him about, the mountains and the distances that we can or can't fly, the way the weather is, and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, And ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important. But now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And So we tell him what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing, because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you, in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high, and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life, that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. It was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as, because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people.
Right.
And so the math didn't work out, and we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
Chad, news coming out that the Titans have narrowed down their GM search to 3 candidates, including Ryan Cowden, who's already he's already on the staff, and he was the interim general manager, with or without that title. He was running the organization from that angle to finish the season.
And the other two are Rand Carthen of the 49ers in their front office, and is Ian Cunningham?
Yes.
Ian Cunningham of the Bears is the third candidate. Now, the way it's being phrased in the report is at least 3. There's at least 3 that are advancing the second round. And most think that the Titans will hire their general manager by week's end.
And that's
so soon.
This is also the round I would expect where Vrabel gets involved.
Yep.
OutKick 360 rolls on. Chad, so you sent the tweet through a text to us this morning that just said, need to get into this. I had no idea we were still canceling college games due to COVID. But that is exactly what's happening with Northwestern and Iowa.
So Iowa tweets out schedule update: Wednesday's game versus Northwestern. This was set to be played in Iowa City. Will not be played as scheduled due to COVID-19 health and safety protocols. Within the Northwestern program, the two schools will work with the Big Ten on rescheduling options. Our guy Matty Ice with the old school Iowa jacket on right now, very upset that this game's not taking place. He had big money on the Hawkeyes in this game. I think a couple things going on here. One, Northwestern doesn't want to play. They have other injuries also, and they have sickness now with their team. So they just really, really didn't want to have to put out walk-ons and go get massacred on the road against Iowa is part of this. And the other thing that just blows my mind right now is how this is now with us forever. I am coming to the realization that if you just don't want to play a game, you can claim COVID outbreak in 2023 or 2025 or 2037 and just say we can't play. Tested positive for COVID, can't do it. How, Hutton, did we make it through decades upon decades of sports, playing games and not canceling games for flu outbreaks, for colds, for stomach virus, for anything else, under the pretense of if you're too sick to play, you don't play? I'm going back and forth with a buddy, Brian Rice in Knoxville, who hosts a show there, who works for the University of Tennessee on their broadcast. And he's been working with them since 2004. He's saying that they were forced to get a flu shot in 2004 in order to travel with the team. I didn't know that was a thing, first and foremost. But second, I keep coming back and saying, show me all the games in 2004 that were canceled for flu. Teams get sick. People get sick. And he said, I'm glad there's such stringent protocols in place with these teams. Hutton, I don't want to play high school Harry here, but I played a little high school athletics, right?
Go ahead. You've been in multiple layup lines.
I got sick, playing sports. Yeah. Here are the protocols. If you're too sick to practice or play, you don't.
You don't play.
And the moment you feel that sick, you know what you do? You go back in the locker room, you pack your stuff up, you get your book bag. If you're old enough to drive, you drive your tail home. If not, your buddy comes and picks you up or your mom comes and picks you up, and you stay out of the locker room and away from the team until you're feeling well again. These are the protocols that were in place for years and years, and somehow we managed to not cancel games doing it.
Imagine if the game was canceled due to the flu for Michael Jordan instead of him just being hung over and pointing to the flu. The flu game would not exist. The legend of Jordan and his big night wouldn't exist because of the flu/COVID.
We've really opened the door for just madness in terms of how we can cancel games now. I've never, the only question I ask people say, well, they've always tested. If you get, okay, go back and show me all the cancellations. Go back and show me where we've treated something that's worse. I had a doctor actually reply to a tweet saying, if you're going to test, you should test for more serious conditions like meningitis and all these other things. As someone who's had meningitis, I will raise my hand and say, I'm not taking the court in any setting if someone on the other team has meningitis. That's one that if you know you have, please do not play. First off, you would not physically be able to, but that is something very, very serious.
How much of this
that could take place
is due to the private school aspect? Is like a Northwestern and Vandy doing this? Are they testing more often than?
That's a good question. I don't know. Also, all these schools were told to get the vaccine.
Right.
I'm assuming all these athletes are vaccinated. So,
well, based on the private, are
you admitting that the vaccinations don't work to the level that they're supposed to work when you say they're too sick to play?
We know that.
Because if everyone on the court is vaccinated, then what's the problem?
Right. Well,
remember, the vaccine was supposed to prevent things like this. Go get vaccinated so we don't have to cancel things.
The problem
Wasn't that a big part of the sales pitch?
Yeah, but what's your original point, though? It's that they were going to have to play a bunch of walk-ons.
Oh, yeah. I think that they're ducking this game, personally. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a convenient shield if you don't want to play.
So are they going to be out? Are they going to be out for Saturday's game as well, based on protocol? You can just cancel one.
It's just
down to a 24-hour bug now?
I don't know. It's also amazing how this thing has transformed in terms of public perception and what we know. And, remember in the early stages of the NFL, if someone tested positive, I mean, it was like a death sentence in terms of their credibility in the league. How dare you? How dare the Titans have an outbreak?
Right.
What have you done irresponsible to have this outbreak? And you almost get the scarlet letter on you if you had an outbreak. And then it was, you get vaccinated and we're going to get back to normal life and games won't be canceled. You can go to sporting events and rub elbows with other fans and do all these things. And now here we are in 2023, 2 teams, I'm sure, all fully vaccinated and boosted except for maybe 1 or 2 players. And the response is, we got to cancel the game.
But even if they're not, who cares at this point? Like, when's the last time you've heard about it from the college athletic standpoint? You know what I'm saying? Until today.
I don't. I don't understand how we're still in this holding pattern. And I brought this up when it was going on, that this was going to change things forever. It's going to change people forever. It's changing sports forever. Granted, it's not happening much. I don't want to be an extremist here. But the fact that we are 2.5 years moved from quarantining and social distancing, and we're having a game canceled, you could just say sickness, right? If an entire team got wiped out with a stomach bug, 24-hour, 48-hour, and you've got your entire team vomiting and can't board a plane to go to a game.
Which is what we heard in the World Cup.
I would understand someone coming back
and saying... The
World
Cup was using that.
Yeah, well, there was a team that half the roster, Netherlands, before they played the U.S., and half of them were sick. They looked fine, by the way.
I know, but they said they had the flu.
Yeah, I'd understand coming back and saying, we physically can't make the trip because our guys are so sick. But just the blanket COVID outbreak. Done.
Chad,
sorry, game's not happening tonight.
You were among those that I would classify as patient zero, even though at the time we just said Chad had the flu. We've seen this guy host a show through this before.
Much research is going to be done on my body. It's not over my dead body. Well, it is over my dead body. When I die, they're going to do a lot of research on this body because I may have been one of the first in the U.S. to have COVID at the NFL Combine.
A lot of research on the Withrow.
Hutton saw me shivering under a scarf and a full jacket indoors an entire show.
We'll have to wash the tanning oil off of you first, though.
I sure Hutton going, Chad, are you okay? About 4 times during the show as I'm shaking on air.
More with OutKick 360 next.
Joe has been in office nearly 2 years, and yes, it feels like much longer. But for these last 2 years, plus the 2 prior he campaigned from the basement, the mainstream media, along with fellow Democrats, have covered for Joe. All they needed to do was get him over the finish line and into the White House. They successfully installed that man like the increasingly dim light bulb he is, and it worked. The successfully weaponized impeachments, the pandemic, and mass mail-in voting to get their guy elected. And he's been useful for the radical left. He's pushed through major climate change legislation and other Green New Deal policies disguised as infrastructure and inflation reduction. And he's done it all while barely being awake. It's an accomplishment, but not for the right reasons. But it's no secret Joe is sleeping. That whole weekend at Bernie charade can only work so long. The expiration date on it and Joe himself is coming. And in fact, it may have already come. Enter news of these batches of classified documents found in various Biden nooks and crannies. Even the mainstream media is covering it, and even leftist pundits and his fellow Democrats seemed alarmed at the findings. Or is it feigned shock and alarm? Follow me as we connect the dots in this very political game of Clue. They've known about at least one batch of these documents since early November of last year. They had to keep it quiet so they could keep the heat on Trump's documents and his alleged criminal activity. But now the cat is out of the bag, and it's my sincere belief that not only are Democrats okay with their man going down, but I'd go as far as to say it was Democrats who leaked the news. Why? Because they don't want to be pigeonholed into a futile life support campaign leading up to 2024. They don't want Biden. These findings of classified documents at Casa, Closet, and Garage a la Biden makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner for them to move away from Joe. Yes, if you listen closely, hear that? You can hear a man in the Sacramento, California governor's mansion readying his hair gel. You can hear a very disappointing diversity pick greasing up her broom. A man named Chasten picking out decor for the White House holiday display. And if you listen really, really closely, you can even hear a nasty woman somewhere in Chappaqua, New York, steaming a pantsuit. They are sitting on ready, wait for it. But before we go today, I'd like to wish a very, very happy birthday to them.
Well, look, my wife has a rule in her family. When somebody's birthday, sing happy birthday. You ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Alan. Happy birthday to you. Well.
Coming up in 20 minutes, Giants running back Otis Anderson joins us. 10,000-yard rusher, Super Bowl 25 MVP, two-time Super Bowl champ. He'll weigh in on Saquon Barkley and the Giants as they get set for the Philadelphia Eagles. OutKick 360, final hour is here.
You know what I know about Otis Anderson, Hutton? Tecmo Bowl.
Oh.
My earliest memories of Tecmo Bowl feature playing with the Giants because Lawrence Taylor was amazing on defense and giving the ball to Otis Anderson as a running back for the Giants. They were a great. Now he wasn't Bo Jackson or anything like that on the game, but he was a very reliable running back option on Tecmo Bowl.
Divisional playoffs. We'll start to preview those individual matchups coming up with Otis Anderson. Chad, things get going in the divisional round, 4:30 Eastern kickoff time on Saturday, and that's where Jacksonville will travel to Kansas City. I'm curious where your take is here because we'll see both 1 seeds on Saturday. Which of the two road teams benefits more off of playing last week with the opportunity to catch one of the 2 1 seeds, if I'm making sense there, one of the 2 1 seeds,
yep,
a little rusty, sluggish out of the gate, a chance to pounce first? Would you say Jacksonville or New York?
Jacksonville, given the circumstances of their game and the fact that they were all but pronounced dead at halftime of that game, the way Trevor Lawrence played. I mean, they pulled one out of the fire. It feels like that leads to more momentum. I don't know that momentum is a real thing when it comes to playing a new team the next week. I can tell you this, momentum can be stopped when you get a week off in football. And maybe that's the case for one of these teams.
Could.
Chiefs or Eagles getting ready for this game. But I do think that Jacksonville is in a spot where they've got a little bit more mojo based on the way they had to finish out their season. I know the Giants were up against it also, but every week felt like a playoff
you're
game.
Right. Yeah.
Going back to the game in Nashville against the Titans.
And the Giants finished 2-5-1.
Yes, the Jags won the AFC South in the final game of the regular season at home. They followed it up with a miraculous comeback in the second half against the Chargers at home. it feels like they're riding more of a wave going into this game. Now, if you're just asking me matchup-wise, teams going head-to-head, I think the Giants have more of an advantage than Jacksonville to get the win in this divisional game.
So, earlier this year, we saw Jacksonville on the road in Kansas City. Of course, we've seen Giants, Eagles too. But in just that one matchup, Kansas City got out to a 20-point lead. I believe it was early second quarter. And this was a day where Mahomes, passed for 4 touchdowns and maybe ran for another. Just one pick in that game. Point being, Jacksonville nearly pulled a comeback in that too. Now, fourth quarter, it was a 10-point advantage, but they didn't go away. Lawrence was able to catch fire again. The only way they go in and win in Arrowhead is you've got to come out and opening drive, go down and get points, right? You can't start slow and give KC a 7-0 advantage after the first 2 possessions, right? The Jags can't wait around. Now, they're capable. The run game, certainly capable. You've got Chris Jones in the middle of that defensive front for KC. But I tend to lean your way on this, even though KC's favored, I believe, by 9, and I think that's about right. And the Giants, even with some backups playing, the Giants gave Philly a run in Week 18 in a game where they had to win, and Dallas wasn't playing well. The Giants' backup still played okay throughout the duration of that game against Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think a number of factors here. The advantage goes to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs for having been there and done that. This Philly team hasn't done that to the level of the Chiefs. So I think there is an advantage having that playoff experience. And I think Jacksonville, while they come in with momentum, I think the Giants are better than the Jags right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the Eagles are susceptible, but I don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And we don't really know about Jalen Hurts and this group in the playoffs until we see it.
Well, normally the teams playing in the wild card round recently are winning the Super Bowl, right? I think a lot of people are also surprised with the way Buffalo played last week. Buffalo was nearly the 1 seed, right? They had one of the games that was a no contest. But they won the head-to-head against Kansas City, and who knows how the matchup would have ended up in Week 17 against Cincinnati, where we have that matchup now. I think one of the 2 teams, the 1 seeds, ends up playing a Buffalo-type game from last week, where their opponent's going to stick around way too long. And, in those games, if Daniel Jones or Trevor Lawrence is able to step up and make the plays that we didn't see from Miami, one of these 2 is going home. It's ending at their home stadium in the divisional round.
I also don't believe it's going to take a Buffalo level of bad performance for one of these 2 teams to hang around, given that they have their starting quarterbacks. The fact that Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins had a chance, that's on Buffalo.
Turnover, yeah.
That is on, but they're up 17-0, and they almost choked that game away. They didn't. It's survive and advance right now, but KC...
Mahomes will turn it over.
KC and Philly have to play really good to win this game. This is not just to show up and don't blow it. This is play well. If they play well, they're going to win. They're the better teams, but they have to play well. That was almost a disaster for Buffalo.
Mahomes he's thrown 12 picks this season, tied with Burrow and Rodgers. The most interceptions, Prescott, Davis Mills, tied with 15, followed by Cousins, Carr, Allen, and Matt Ryan, before you get to the Mahomes, Rodgers, Burrow level of things. On Sunday, Bengals on the road against Buffalo. Both of these teams didn't play up to the standard of we know that certainly that the Bills can play and the Bengals going into the postseason. And we get the head-to-head matchup that we would have seen if not for the Damar Hamlin collapse in the first quarter, 2 weeks ago. So we get the head-to-head in Buffalo this go-around. And then Dallas, winning last night over Tampa, they'll be on the road in San Francisco. Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott is headed to the NFC Championship game, where they will play the winner of the Giants or Eagles for the right to go to Super Bowl 57. Purdy or Prescott to play for the right to go to Super Bowl 57. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more right for Dak Prescott. Purdy definitely doesn't sound right based on everything. I'm curious to see how Jalen Hurts plays this weekend. If there's one player that I'm eyeballing more than anyone else, it's Jalen Hurts for the Eagles.
Well, and just the overall rhythm of their offense, right? Like they have not been playing all that well. Of course, Hurts was injured. But to what you're saying, I mean, the shoulder, he was in a lot of pain in Week 18. Sirianni admitted that. They played him because they needed to win to get the bye, so he's allowed the extra rest. But they really shouldn't have needed that. They needed one more win and couldn't get it with Minshew at quarterback. So they're left playing their starter, and he's wincing. Like he's in a lot of pain with the shoulder problem. How much does that linger? We'll see after a couple hits against the Giants.
Ready to watch all of it.
And then, Daniel Jones, what a phenomenal story. Going into the season, it was Tua and Jalen Hurts in a prove-it year. And Tua was doing it too, but Hurts has certainly proven it. And then there was Daniel Jones, who the Giants declined his fifth-year option, making him a free agent at the end of the season. They could always tag him too. But no one expected this with the new head coach. Saquon Barkley's coming back, but you didn't really know what he was going to be like. And then he took off. They got off to a hot start because Saquon Barkley was leading the way in the rushing category, not just for his team, but the NFL through the first month of the season. And then we've seen a progression of Jones stepping up and making plays to an offensive roster that is a group of, they're not cast-offs, but they're a group of players that no one could really identify in a lineup of NFL superstars, that's for sure. And defensively, they do just enough. And Jones makes it work with his arm and his leg, and he's doing it well with Daboll. Brian Daboll's done a tremendous job.
Yeah, he's the coach of the year. I don't think there's much doubt about it. There's some other candidates out there, but that turnaround has been remarkable. That was a roster that was thought to be maybe the worst in the NFL that he inherited, and going into this season. Started with a shocker here in Nashville against the Titans at the time. That was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Then they kept winning, and maybe it wasn't as shocking. Looked like they were down and out late in the year, and then still found a way to get in the playoffs. And Daniel Jones played terrific in that game against Minnesota. Did something we haven't seen from a quarterback in the NFL in the playoffs. Went for over 300 yards, rushed for over 70, threw 2 touchdowns, no turnovers in the game. He's made himself a lot of money. And keep this in mind. I always love, this is one next-gen stat that I'm fascinated by. Daniel Jones is faster than Lamar Jackson. At their top speed on their fastest runs, he was clocked going faster than Lamar Jackson. That would shock many people. This is not just some pocket passer. This is a multifaceted running threat that can change a game in different ways. I'm not going to start the elite debate.
Go ahead.
Or not with Daniel Jones.
He's Joe Flacco.
I don't think he's elite. He's better than Joe Flacco right now, for sure.
Yes. But that was the great debate with Flacco.
He's absolutely going to be in the discussion for top 10, top third of the league starting quarterbacks when we start next year. And he could make a case to inch on up there even closer with a good performance in this game.
And what's great is they didn't pick up the fifth-year option for Jones, I'm saying, because that would leave them with another opportunity to be like, all right, we're going to bring him back on the fifth-year option to prove it again. Then we'll work out the contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they've got to make a decision because he's done enough. And if you're the Giants, he's done enough to where you don't want to be in the market to have to determine what you're doing next. And I think he's clicked well with Daboll and with Saquon Barkley, who's also very deserving of moving forward with the organization. They've done a really nice job, and they have young talent on defense that's going to help bolster them long term. Chad, Daboll would get a lifetime contract if you were a college coach right now.
Yes, he would. He would indeed.
They're handing out the lifetime contracts at the top of the sport in college football. Of course, it's bad. These deals where coaches are ending up getting the extra year tacked on. And it's just a race to see who's going to be the highest paid. Is it Kirby Smart? Is it Nick Saban? Is it Dabo Swinney? Is it so on? And so, I mean, at some point, who steps in and says the buyout money is ridiculous, lifetime contracts shouldn't be a thing, and we stop paying top dollar for coaches who fail? It's a great profession to be in, because if you don't accomplish what you're hired to do, you're getting guaranteed money for the rest of your contract life. as they kick you to the curb after 3 years. If you don't meet a standard of 3 years, they're going to pay you for 5. That's the dumbest thing in structure I've seen from the sports landscape when it comes to college coaching and the overall hierarchy, where these guys aren't just the head coach, they're running the university.
There's an imbalance of fear in college sports, and here's what I mean by that. There's not enough fear from coaches. When coaches get that contract to coach at the highest level in college sports, even when it's their first contract, they make so much, and the incentive to keep winning isn't quite there because they're going to get money in a buyout either way. Now, on the flip side, if you have some success early on, the fear imbalance of the administration, it's like they're watching the scariest horror flick ever, because their fear is, I'm going to lose my guy. I am going to lose this guy that I found that's having success. He's going to go somewhere else. I'm going to look like an idiot. We're going to look cheap. So I have to do whatever it takes to keep this guy here for as long as possible. And that fear leads these athletic directors, school presidents, boosters, collectives, whoever. They're now ponying up and saying, take everything from us, because we can't live with the fear of our good coach leaving for a rival or leaving for another job. So please come right in and take all the cash off our shelves, and we'll sign whatever you want. And that's not good for the sport. And on the flip side, I don't see enough fear from these coaches about losing, because once they sign a contract big enough, what are they afraid of? Cliff Kingsbury lost. Dude got a buyout. He's in Thailand with his 24-year-old girlfriend right now. You think he's afraid of anything? I'll talk to you about your future jobs when I have a chance. Don't care right now. The incentive to work and to win is not high enough. There is an imbalance of fear in college sports, and I fear it's going to wreck the game.
Universities have spent a combined $530 million on buyout money for coaches over the last decade. Just this year alone, Scott Frost, Carl Dorrell, Jeff Collins, Paul Christ, and Herm Edwards combined for $56.7 million in buyout money. Guys that we would not even list off in a top 25 of just top names in college football. Scott Frost is getting $15 million. They could have waited for the buyout to drop, 2 weeks? And the buyout drops, they pay it anyway. That tells you how much, they're not cash poor in college athletics. Carl Dorrell, one of the worst jobs in America, got paid $11.4 million to be the worst head coach.
To leave.
In the Power 5. Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech, where his interim takes over and gets the head coaching job. 11.3 to leave Georgia Tech, a university that didn't even want to change the direction of the program. They paid him $11 million to just leave, and we'll keep doing what we're doing, exactly what you were doing with one of your coaches. Here's $11 million. Paul Christ, we were surprised by this, $11 million buyout. Yes, Jeff Collins has the same buyout money as Paul Christ at Wisconsin.
Paul Christ needs a new agent, because Paul Christ is a little bit more accomplished than him. He should have had a bigger buyout.
Herm Edwards, who apparently the coaches on his staff were allegedly trying to throw games on purpose, got paid $8 million by his coaches doing that.
And now he's getting paid a lot more by ESPN to go back and work as being an analyst with them. It's out of whack. And look, I think that people that get into this profession are competitive, and naturally they want to win. I'm not saying they're tanking it once they make the money, but what are they really afraid of? Once you make it to that level, let's say you're a college football or college basketball coach in the head coach in the SEC or Big Ten. When you make that baseline level, you're making the lowest amount in the conference. Doesn't matter. You're making a ton of money, and you've got a nice, sweet buyout. So even if you take a job that's difficult and you don't win, you're going to get paid to leave. And then what are you going to do? Well, I could take a year off and do some TV, or I could just take a year off and make all of my buyout money and not offset it with anything to work. And then I'm going to go get another high-paying job as an assistant at another great program. There's no fear. Everyone else in the world, for the most part, lives day to day in some level of fear that if you don't show up and do your job, and you do that consistently, you're not going to have that job for long. A lot of these guys don't care. And we kind of laugh at it. Well, this guy, Scott Frost, I mean, he's laughing his way to the bank right now.
That's why Jimbo
with what
Fisher
happened.
doesn't want to change offensive coordinator play calling.
What can anyone
Right.
threaten Jimbo Fisher with?
In a world of buyouts that it doesn't matter the amount, Texas A&M had an amount they weren't willing to pay. That's how elaborate his buyout is at Texas A&M. Coming up, O.J. Anderson. Otis Anderson joins us, former Giants running back. We'll preview the Giants matchup for the third time against Philadelphia. That's coming up. And we'll get his thoughts on Saquon Barkley and the turnaround we've seen in the backfield and behind center from Daniel Jones. That's next on OutKick 360.
Another edition of the Trey Wallace podcast. Happy to be joined by my buddy from the Sporting News, Bill Bender. It feels like it's been about a day since I have seen Bill, which is the case since we were out there in rainy California. Bill, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, we didn't get tanned. We did not get a tan in sunny LA. We got rained on all week, didn't we?
That was depressing. Like, I go out there and I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be sunny. It's going to be California. It's going to be nice. No, it turns out it's raining. We're getting drenched during the post-game ceremonies on the field. I don't know. Whoever came up with the idea for that stadium did not think about the rain that would come in sideways.
No, it was a interesting weekend for sure. I'm glad you and I got to connect a little bit and go to media day, and then the game. I don't know what to talk about. You start. I've been using the analogy as like you brought Cinderella to the final, and you ended up watching Carrie.
Yeah, is it? I mean, in looking back on it and how everything plays out, I think if Michigan beats TCU, we get a better game, in the final. But turns out that TCU had their number, and you go into this matchup with Georgia, and they're just such a dominant football team from the offensive line, the defensive line, the wide receivers, you name it, and you look at TCU and they had their flaws. And I don't even think Kondre Miller being a running back for TCU would have done anything for the Horned Frogs. I just think they're Jalen Carter and what Georgia's defensive line was able to do. I think it just showed throughout the season that they just wrapped up what they had done for the 13 games prior.
Yeah, right off the bat, there was a false start. And after the game, Sonny Dykes said, we'd only had 3 false starts the whole season. So right off the bat, there's nerves. You heard him talk about how they overran things, may have, missed assignments, breakdowns, and you can't have that many. And it showed, they had multiple, and you can't have that against a team that's a heavyweight like Georgia that's been there, done that. Their execution in the first quarter, especially on offense, was unbelievable, especially with Bennett. And honestly, I thought this game was probably, and this is horrible to say, I thought it was probably over at 17-7.
I don't disagree. It got so out of hand, you started wondering, okay, what's going to be the title to your story? It just didn't feel like it was going to be close, no matter what TCU did. I give credit to how the game was set up and played, and the atmosphere and whatnot. TCU fans traveled well. Georgia fans traveled well. It made for a fun environment. I think when you look at the game, though, Georgia is just a dominating force. And I want your opinion on this. We use the word dynasty a lot. I think in college basketball, I think in baseball, I think in football, we use it a lot, NFL. Is Georgia at that mark yet, or would they need to win another one in the next 2 years to maybe set up the whole dynasty conversation? Or are we here with the back-to-back titles?
I think we're here because, so they'll be our lifetime, I think, the 4th team to have a chance to go for a three-peat. And I go look at those 3 teams, and I was talking about this earlier today with somebody. Nebraska won back-to-back with Osborne, and then that 3rd year, we all know where we were when Arizona State beat them.
Coming up, Otis Anderson will join us. Chad, of the 3 quarterbacks with the playoff wins that were unexpected, I think did you expect Dallas to win last night? I know I picked the Bucs, but
So are we crossing them off the list?
No, we can add them. Let's add them.
Go with your original thought of the 3.
Of the 3 quarterbacks,
Okay.
Daniel Jones, Brock Purdy, Trevor Lawrence. Who do you trust the most to win again?
Brock Purdy.
And everything's allowed in this answer.
Now,
Defense,
it's
coach.
That's not universal. What I mean by that is I expect Brock Purdy to win. The majority of that is because of his team.
Sure. Yeah.
With the 49ers at home, right?
Okay.
If we're just putting quarterback,
Well, let me
throw
ask you
them
this
a
way.
team, and it doesn't matter in the playoffs, who do I trust the most out of those 3? I'd probably lean Daniel Jones.
Okay, so let me ask it this way then. Which quarterback of those 3 do you trust the most to have a repeat performance? And for Trevor Lawrence's performance, let's say the second half, because the other 2 were phenomenal. Which of the 3 can have a repeat performance from the wild card weekend?
Brock Purdy.
See, I'm with you there too.
Because I just think he's going to be the most consistent of those. I don't.
And
where he is
has
right
been.
now and who he is and what he's being asked to do.
He doesn't really turn it over.
Yeah, and I think that you think 7th round pick, Mr. Irrelevant, they're going to have big swings in play. I just think Kyle Shanahan is so good about what he's asking him that it's going to generate some consistent performances. So I would say Purdy because Daniel Jones was so good. I mean, he's going to – I can't say I'm expecting him to come out and play that way again against the Eagles. That's a big ask.
So you've got Purdy against the Dallas defense.
Against a better defense, too.
Dallas, Philly's good, man. They had, 50, how many sacks? 60-something sacks?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Minnesota's defense is not good.
Oh, yes.
Philly's defense is it's going to be much tougher for Daniel Jones to repeat that performance he had against Minnesota against Philly.
Of the 3 defenses, you'd rather face Kansas City's defense. You'd rather be Trevor Lawrence, as crazy as that sounds.
Yes.
But it's also going to require you to score more than the other 2 quarterbacks would have to score to win if you're Trevor Lawrence and Jags. The over-under for that game, I'll pull it up, but Trevor Lawrence has got to be Justin Herbert of 2 years ago against KC. And will Doug Peterson roll the dice the same way, not nearly to the extent that Staley did, where he's going for it on 4th down in his own territory in the first quarter. I'm not saying that, but at what point do you pull out the play in order to keep a drive alive on 4th down? That's what the game comes down to, because I think Jacksonville can keep it close. So the over-under is 52.5. That is the largest over-under of the weekend. Second largest is Cincinnati, Buffalo, and Philly, New York are both 48.5 points. And then Dallas, San Francisco at 46.5. I would take the over in Dallas, San Fran.
I would too. It's just, you mentioned Purdy versus Prescott, and one of those 2 is going to be in the NFC Championship game. The fact that we're even discussing Brock Purdy having a better performance than Dak Prescott is crazy to me right now.
And Philadelphia, right now, the 4th best odds to win the Super Bowl. 4th in Vegas. To win out in Super Bowl, be champions of Super Bowl 57. KC is the favorite at plus 300. We're looking right now at DraftKings. Followed by Buffalo at plus 330. San Francisco at plus 450. You can get Philadelphia at plus 500 to win the Super Bowl right now.
That's pretty good.
Cincinnati, you can get plus 750. I love that. I would throw some coin on Philly and Cincy.
Cincy a year ago, I mean, you look back at how they won in the playoffs. They won a pretty close one against the Raiders in round 1.
Yeah,
I forget the final score, but I feel like it was in the balance in the second half. Very close against the Titans.
It was a big interception at the end of that game.
Yeah. They weathered, 7 sacks? Something like that?
9.
No. I knew it was an odd number. I knew.
It was really
9 was even worse.
I always say it was really 11 because he was sacked 2 more times. Those hits still were felt. He was sacked 2 more times, but there were flags after the completion of the play that called back those 2 sacks. But he was sacked 9 times, which tied a postseason single game record. Still won that game.
Well, I'm saying they had a great second half in the win over KC. They lose in the Super Bowl. But those 3 wins, and Joe Burrow said this after the game, winning in the playoffs is usually ugly. It's tough, and it can be ugly. That was an ugly win for them against Baltimore. It's starting out the same way it did a year ago.
Yeah.
Wasn't pretty in the beginning, and that's a team that knows how to close things out with their quarterback and win games. I don't think Burrow really closed things out for that team. It was their defense that did the work. But it's starting out very similar to a year ago when they went on a run and won the AFC.
And Cincinnati has Kansas City's number. So can they get through Buffalo, a matchup we haven't seen this year, and end up back in Kansas City? By the way, tickets went on sale today for the neutral site AFC Championship game in Atlanta, where fans can start purchasing that in the event that it's Kansas City against Buffalo for the right to go to the Super Bowl.
Hunter, are you ever surprised at how many media members are Cowboys fans? I look up on TV and I feel like many media members are Cowboys fans.
I feel like that generation, though.
That's when the nation was split, Steelers and Cowboys?
Pretty much.
The older generation?
Yeah, for network TV and that's all you had, if you were not in a pro market, you were fed Dallas or Pittsburgh based on the region that you were in. So I'm not surprised by that. There are a ton of Dallas Cowboys fans, though.
Yeah,
do we have the ratings for that for last night?
Well, I saw ratings for, one of the games over the weekend, and it was averaging over 30 million during the game. It was at an astronomically high number. And then the question was, now what do you think Dallas versus Tampa is going to do tonight? But it was one of the games from Sunday. And maybe it was Bills Dolphins.
Really?
They had over 30 million for a lot of that broadcast on Sunday afternoon. I think the Bills are going to be a big ratings grabber.
Yeah,
because the DeMar Hamlin story.
You were dead on when you brought up.
I think it's going to be a huge draw every week.
Imagine if it's Buffalo and Dallas in the Super Bowl.
That would be huge.
The country, America's team against America.
I don't know if you saw this, but a story came out right before the show. On3 Sports does their national recruiting rankings.
And Shannon will be in with us tomorrow.
He'll be in tomorrow, but I want to get your perspective on this because I have a very strong opinion on this, and I'll bring it up with Shannon. They have their On3 300, top 300 players in America, and they changed this throughout the recruiting calendar. They just had their final 2023 rankings, and they leapfrogged Nico Iamaleava. They leapfrogged. The frog leapt. The frog being Nico Iamaleava. Leapfrogged. I was saying, it's one of those when I was saying, I'm like, it doesn't sound right in my head as I'm saying it.
It'll happen to me tomorrow.
And then I said another version of it that sounded even worse. So then I came back and said it the way I said it the first time, and it made more sense. But they leapfrogged Nico Iamaleava to first over Arch Manning in their final recruiting rankings. To which the cynic in me says, boy, this is a great way to get some publicity this time of year, to just do something that seems controversial and get people talking that really doesn't mean anything. Because those guys haven't done anything in the last, month or two since they had the last ranking that came out.
So we'll ask Shannon what led to that change.
I could be dead wrong. They could have done some, they could have seen them in practices or seen them at some all-star game or something else or gone back and reviewed more film. I don't know. But I see that and think, this is a good way to get people talking. But Nico headed to Tennessee. Arch Manning headed to Texas. I also want to report, there's an OutKick story about Arch Manning constantly losing his ID in the first 2 weeks that he's at Texas. Because there's people posting pictures of his ID that have found it all over the place.
Do you still have your college ID?
No. But
I have mine. I'll have to actually go home and get it. But I could bring it in for you, and you can decipher whether or not I could get away with still showing that ID photo.
Yeah, we have a picture of Archibald C. Manning of a girl. I think it's a girl that's holding it up. So I've talked to someone very close to the Manning family about this.
Yes.
And they say that Arch has no idea why this is a story. He thinks it's incredibly dumb that people are writing about it. Says that he misplaced his ID once, and he got the ID back from the girl who had it. So he has not gone back to the registrar or the office to get the ID done multiple times. That someone is replicating this or taking pictures with it, making it look like his ID is just showing up all over the place, when in fact only one person had it. So a bit of breaking news here on OutKick 360. Talking with someone, you probably know who I'm talking about.
I do.
Talking with someone very close to the situation.
Knowing who
that
this
would
is coming
know.
from, this also tracks that they would also lose their student ID multiple times in a week.
Yes. But it was funny. When it was brought up to me, it was, I sent the story to this person, and they came back and said, ha ha, this is dumb, and Arch doesn't know why this is going around because he still has his ID. But then I later found out, well, he did misplace his ID, but he got it back.
Sure.
And I said, so hold on, did he go and get a new one so his old one is in someone else's hands? Or did he find the one that he misplaced?
Well, I'm looking at it right now.
And the story is he found the one that was misplaced.
I mean, what good does a fake student ID
it
do?
doesn't.
But you can't load money on it, right?
No.
Like, it's just like you just want to act like you have it. You have Arch Manning's ID.
I mean, I guess it's like fun to have in a frat house to say, hey, you guys want to see Arch Manning's
You see the
student
student's
ID?
ID? We've got a fake ID of our quarterback.
Let's go to the Sig Ep house. You know what they got down there? Arch Manning's lost student ID. Let's go look at it. Let's all sit around and stare at Arch Manning's ID. I don't know. People are weird. Things happen all the time in this world now where the people just do things that make no sense to me.
I lean towards the common sense, like, what's reality? Dude lost his ID multiple times in a week. That's the more like common sense answer to whatever you're being told of everyone's just printing Arch Manning fake IDs at Texas.
Well,
at least put it on a driver's license.
So I'm a big fan of the Manning family, and I love the Manning cast. If we're to say that Arch's, which I've heard, Arch's personality is way more Eli-like than Payton-like.
Yeah.
Eli Manning strikes me as a guy who'd lose a student ID a lot.
For sure.
Like, just very funny but kind of flippant, go with the flow type guy, where Payton would never lose his ID because he's so type A, rigorous, always worked up, right?
Yes.
So I guess that tracks.
So do you think that we'll have the birth? There's no birth date on this. That's why it would be great. Like the McLovin ID, everyone wishes him a happy birthday whenever it's June the 3rd or whatever his birthday was.
This is so good.
So you've got, June 3rd, 1981 is the birth of McLovin from Superbad. We need a fake ID for, I nearly said your source's name, for Arch Manning, that they can...
Our source close to the Manning
Yes.
family. That's how I said I would frame this. A source close to the Manning family confirms. The ID was only misplaced once, but the original ID was retrieved by Arch.
Chad, you were watching the Manning cast last night.
I was.
And looking at what Colin sent, the latest TV ratings, ABC's broadcast of the Cowboys NFC wildcard playoff win against the Bucs. So this is just ABC, not ESPN? Okay. 15 million is what they averaged on ABC and a 3.2 rating. So once we get the combination, it'll reach,
That is
right?
nowhere near what the Bills did, which surprises me a bit. Monday night, though, has been more difficult from a rating standpoint. And I guess even in the playoffs of that game.
No, but it's Dallas, though. That's
what surprises me. But that's a half the audience of the 30 million I saw that were watching at the peak. And throughout much of the game, it was 20 to 30 million people watching Buffalo and Miami.
Maybe the other half is watching Dion.
So Dion was on the Manning cast last night as their guest. He stayed pretty much the entire first half. He was on much of the first quarter, all the second quarter. They had no second quarter guest. And I have to say, he was terrific. I was blown away with his football insight, with his rapport with the Mannings. I was half expecting what you would expect from someone who calls themselves Coach Prime, a little bit of an over-the-top performance, a look-at-me type performance. He was great. He fit right in. He joked with the Mannings. He told great stories. They would ask,
the passer stuff.
what are you doing right here on this play? Tom Brady likes the back shoulder fade down around the goal line. And Dion says, throughout my career, and I'll tell my guys, make them throw it inside. Take away the back shoulder when you know someone likes to throw that pass.
And how about the recall?
He was really good.
Being able to pull the play from Indy where Payton burned him on that.
Yes.
Looking one way and then had the wide open. Was it Harrison that he hit wide open or Reggie Wayne? I can't remember which on the highlight reel now. I guess it would have been Harrison that he hit the wide open touchdown. And Deion's reaction to that was really good too. Look,
Deion also told a story about Payton was asking about him on offense and how many routes did he know? You know, when he would play with the Cowboys sometimes on offense. And he said, I think I knew 2 routes. Like it was a go route and there was a screen pass for me and maybe there was one other thing. But he did say there was a package. And he said, in fact, it was for a game against the New York Giants where I was the quarterback. And he said this was before Wildcat quarterbacks. And I was going to take a snap under center and run the traditional option. He said, Emmett in the backfield
they
with
had
me.
practiced this.
Yes, they had practiced it. It was in a game plan. And he said he was riding the coach the whole time, wanting to get in to run this play, where Deion Sanders is going to take a snap from center and run the option with Emmitt Smith in the backfield, which really interests me.
How did they not run that? They would do everything else.
And he remembered, he said it was a game against the New York Giants that happened. So, didn't happen, I should say. They planned for it, though.
Coming up, we've got the latest injury reports as teams are beginning to prepare for Saturday's games today for the NFC and AFC divisional rounds. The latest on Jalen Hurts. We'll also tell you what Todd Bowles had to say about the offense in Tampa Bay. That's next on OutKick 360.
And how long after 9/11 does your unit, the 160th SOAR, which is the most elite helicopter pilots in the world, how long does it take for you guys to figure out, okay, a plan's being set in motion, we're going to Afghanistan? Was it within days? Was it within weeks?
It was within hours.
Within hours.
So we drive back that night, the battalion commander and I, and the next morning I'm sent down in a 15-passenger van with a bunch of other planners to Tampa, Florida. And we're to plan America's response, as far as the rotary wing side of it. And by October 3rd, I was in the country of Uzbekistan preparing to do personnel recovery for the bombing campaign that was about to kick off.
And this is depicted in the movie 12 Strong. Correct me if I'm wrong, where you guys are going to fly in from Uzbekistan. This is what's known as the horse soldiers. This is going to kind of be the first wave. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So initially we're there for, I want to say about 2 weeks of bombing. And then there is no further plan that we know of. And then all of a sudden, 5th Special Forces Group rolls in. Their commander takes over the task force. We were in Task Force Dagger out of K2 Air Base, Karshi-Kanabad. And he wants a briefing on our capabilities. And so we sat down and we started talking to him about, the mountains and the distances that we can or can't fly, the way the weather is and all these things. And he's like, gee, I wish somebody had told us that ahead of time, and ironically, when I was in Tampa, they were one room over and nobody ever connected us, because it just wasn't considered important, but now it was, especially as they heard that, the mountains were, 20,000 feet and that the weather was horrible and all these things. And so we tell them what we can do. And he goes, well, you guys are going to start doing a UW campaign, which is unconventional warfare. That's where you link up individual operational detachments or ODAs up with factions of the Northern Alliance, which were the allies that we were trying to coordinate with. So it went from there.
So, and I'm glad you brought up the 20,000 feet thing, because I had it in my notes. I wanted to ask you, in the movie, it's depicted that helicopters had never flown that high, and they weren't sure whether or not it could be done. Was that how it actually worked in real life, that you guys didn't know if the altitude was even workable?
Yes and no, but not for the reasons that you might think. So helicopters had flown that high. Chinook helicopters routinely fly at 25,000 feet in Alaska, right over the mountains there. They do the rescue mission at the top of that. It was at Mount McKinley, I think. And so it is possible, but using carrying a usable load, going the distance that we need to go as far as, because we had to trade off fuel for cargo, if you will, people. Right. And so the math didn't work out, and we're wearing supplemental oxygen, or how long is that going to last, per console for the people you got on board. So there's a lot of calculations that have to go into this that, really weren't operationally proven. I operated in Colorado all the time, but that's nothing compared to Afghanistan.
OutKick 360. You can follow us on social just by searching us out. We hope you'll subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We're streaming live at OutKick.com. Jalen Hurts officially off the injury report for the Philadelphia Eagles today. It's cleared. Shoulder, no more. Shoulder injury, no more. In a lot of pain 2 weeks ago, last week. 10 days ago now? And now he's not on the injury report. That's great news for the Eagles, and they're back to being healthy version of their offense. Minshew Mania can settle down, at least for a play.
Minshew Mania can go back to being the hype man on the sideline.
Chiefs are designating Clyde Edwards-Helaire to return from injured reserve, which means he's practicing today in Kansas City. Doesn't mean he necessarily will play. He's got some time to do that. But for a back that they have not received much, if at any really legitimate production, he's coming back at least the right time for a team that at some point is going to need to run the football. I realize that their short passing game and Mahomes allows them to have an extension of their run game in that area, but they get away with not being able to run it much easier than, say, Tampa that we saw last night, who is desperate for a run game. Nonetheless, Clyde Edwards-Helaire back. And Todd Bowles says the team has not made any decision on offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich's future. There was a report this morning that he was out. The translation is, hey, Tom, do you want to come back?
What
and if you do you want Byron Leftwich here?
I guess I'm also to take this as Todd Bowles is completely safe.
That's
and no longer in
the
danger. If he's
indication.
answering questions about Byron Leftwich's future, he is definitely not a one-and-done coach, which some speculated.
So DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona has a no-trade clause as part of his extension with Arizona. But, the reports are they're going to part ways with him through, Bidwell. Bidwell's going to bid him adieu.
To trade him.
And he's got quite a bit. It's an affordable contract on the back end, but this is something that Monty Ossenfort, as the new general manager, inherits. He inherits one of the first things he's going to be doing is trading DeAndre Hopkins. That's, of the things that you don't want to have to do, my guess is trading one of the NFL's best wide receivers. And he's going to be a part of the staff that's done that twice in a row.
It's not just trading him. It's knowing you're trading a guy with a no-trade clause that's going to determine where he goes.
Well, in many ways, that's what AJ did.
He's going to help determine. He's going to have to approve the team. So if you're Monty Ossenfort, you're starting the job working left-handed a little bit with your right hand tied behind your back, because it's not just taking the best offer. It's taking the best offer that DeAndre Hopkins approves with the team that he's going to be dealt to. So that's not an easy spot.
And, Chad, according to Tom Curran, a great reporter in the Boston area, he says that the primary target for offensive coordinator is Bill O'Brien in New England. That makes – that was so easy to link up. And this is great news for Alabama. Both Alabama fans who want a new play caller in control of the Crimson Tide offense, and for Alabama fans that want Mac Jones to have success. He's actually going to have an offensive-minded coach coaching him in 2023.
Is Bill O'Brien recruiting? Is he working for Alabama, or is he
I haven't heard
just
anything.
Sitting out and waiting on his next gig? It's just an awkward arrangement, because he is still the offensive coordinator at Alabama, but this was supposed to be a 2-year service, for lack of a better word, for Bill O'Brien towards Nick Saban. 2-year commitment, and then he was going to go do something else. 2 years is up, and he's in this weird in-between area of, does he have a job with Alabama moving forward, or is everyone just waiting on him to take the next gig? Which I think that's what everyone's doing. Well,
so for a coach in Belichick that just refused to name an offensive coordinator by title, even when it was known who was calling plays, and it still didn't make sense with Matt Patricia, to turn back and go to Bill O'Brien, that is a Robert Kraft call. And we know that the two met right after the end of the regular season. And Belichick said, he told reporters in the final presser, he's like, I'm coming back for a 23rd season or whatever as head coach. But as part of that, he had his owner tell him, hey, let's get the offense right. It's a lot of confusion. And for the results, when they don't match up whatever you were trying to do, I still can't figure out and wrap my head around why they did what they did. Even if you're going that way, why play this game of cat and mouse with the media where you're not going to tell them who's calling plays if it's going to fail that miserably, especially for a second-year quarterback that you've invested in with the 15th overall pick? This is good on all accounts and in every facet of the organization if they can land O'Brien. Yeah, because this is odd to say about the New England Patriots. I don't know what they are right now. I have a hard time saying this is where they are. They're a Super Bowl contender, or they're a team that can compete within their division, or they're a bad team that's rebuilt. I don't know. It's hard to know where they are as a franchise at this point. It's difficult for me to trust Mac Jones and know what he is as a quarterback in the NFL. So this will help give us, if this happens, more clarity on where they are as a team. Well, and they're keeping Gerard Mayo around. That's the other key factor in all of this. Gerard Mayo, who was a hot candidate for defensive coordinator positions, and he's in some cases he was listed in head coaching opportunities as potentially an interview. He's going to stay on as their assistant coach as well. Chad, what's on tap tonight for SEC hoops? Some good games. Vanderbilt is hosting Alabama. So after all the craziness around Alabama's program this week,
They're in Nashville to take on Vanderbilt. You've got Tennessee on the road to take on Mississippi State. There's another big game that Kentucky hosts Georgia tonight also. There's another big SEC game. Biggest college basketball game of the night, though, the Battle of the Sunflower State. Kansas State, Kansas. Kansas fourth in the country, and fourth or second maybe. Fourth. And then Kansas State's 13th, playing in the Big 12.
Was that like an 8 p.m. tip? Or was that the early tip? Surely that's later.
I'm not sure. I just get home and watch all of it. I just flip around and find out what's going on.
I need it on late.
Yeah, HUD needs that 10 p.m. Pac-12 network start. Any game that Bill Walton's on the call for, that's the one Hutton wants. It's usually around 10 o'clock on Central Time.
I used to be a fan of Bill Walton. I can't listen to him now.
Yeah, he's a little over the top for me, too.
Well, it's just never – it's always about him, you know?
Yeah.
The broadcast is about Bill Walton, not the game. And I realize there's several broadcasters like that.
We don't know what issue. I mean,
he's on the opposite end of it.
He could get into the rain in Southern California and spend 5 minutes of a game talking about the flooding in Southern California. You never know what you're going to get from Bill Walton. I will give you a recommendation that this is not something that's just out of the blue that's no one knows about. But Last of Us on HBO that debuted Sunday night.
Yes.
I am not one for zombie apocalypse stuff. Never watched an episode of The Walking Dead. Never saw World War Z with Brad Pitt. I think the one zombie thing I saw, I Am Legend with Will Smith, I think had zombies in it. Or some form of zombie, maybe.
And an awesome dog.
That's about it. This is a show based on a video game from 2003. And the first episode is very well done. Craig Mazin writes, directs, show runs. He is the brain behind Chernobyl, which was on HBO, which was really good. So it's terrific. Give it a shot.
6 p.m.
Episode 1 is promising.
6 p.m. tip for Kansas State, which means, Chad, let me know how that game is, please.
I will. The Battle of the Sunflower State.
I'll be checking in on the SEC matchups, though. I'm eager to see how Alabama comes out and plays.
Yeah.
After the
Tennessee
federal,
bouncing back after a disappointing home loss to Kentucky also.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big one on the road against Mississippi State.
We'll recap that. We'll look ahead to the NFL weekend as well tomorrow for OutKick 360. We start at 3 o'clock Eastern right here across the OutKick Network.